The thread of betrayal. The wrought iron gates of our Garden District home in New Orleans always seemed to hum with an unspoken promise of sanctuary. For 30 years, it had been my refuge, my canvas, the place where Mark and I had woven a life rich with laughter, art, and the occasional spirited debate over jazz music. Mark, with his quick wit and charming smile, was the anchor to my more whimsical nature. He was a man of grand gestures, an architect of dreams, or so I believed. We were Evelyn and Mark, a well-oiled machine of domestic bliss, a unit admired by our social circle, a seemingly impenetrable fortress of shared affection and ambition. Then came Chloe. She arrived on our doorstep with a storm in her eyes and a worn suitcase in her hand, a fragile bird battered by the gales of a bitter divorce. Chloe, my oldest friend, the confidant with whom I'd shared teenage secrets, college dreams, and the anxieties of early motherhood. Our marriage to David, a cold, calculating man, had imploded in a particularly ugly fashion, leaving her raw, financially destitute and adrift. "Evelyn, I have nowhere else to go," she'd whispered, her voice barely a thread, her shoulders shaking. My heart, ever too generous, too quick to empathize, had opened wide. "Of course, darling, this is your home now, for as long as you need. We'll get through this together." She settled into our spacious guest room, a room that once held the echoes of laughter from our children, Gabrielle and Elise, now grown and scattered across the country, pursuing their own burgeoning careers. Chloe seemed genuinely broken. She barely ate. Her eyes were perpetually red-rimmed and distant, and she spoke in soft, almost inaudible tones, punctuated by long, desolate silences. My maternal instincts flared, overriding any nascent doubts. I cooked her favorite Cajun meals, drew her lavender baths infused with essential oils to soothe her frayed nerves, and listened tirelessly to her agonizing stories of David's betrayal and heartbreak, often late into the night. Mark, too, was unusually solicitous. He'd bring her cups of herbal tea, offer a comforting arm to lean on as she recounted her woes, and listen with a solemn, compassionate expression that I found deeply touching. "She's been through so much, Ev," he'd say, his voice laced with concern. And I'd nod, warmed by his compassion, proud of the man I had married. The first hint of unease was subtle, a discordant note in the symphony of our usual domesticity. It was a glance, fleeting and too long, between Chloe and Mark across the dinner table, as I recounted a trivial anecdote about a gallery opening. Or the way Chloe's hand lingered on Mark's arm a second too long when he passed her a newspaper, her fingers brushing his skin with an almost imperceptible intimacy. I dismissed it. Chloe was fragile, in desperate need of kindness. Mark was simply being the compassionate man I knew him to be, extending grace to a friend in despair. My mind, ever eager to see the best in people, especially those I loved, spun narratives of innocent comfort and affectionate concern. My own intuition, a quiet whisper in the back of my mind, was easily silenced. Then came the late-night whispers. I'd wake in the quiet hours, disturbed by hushed, urgent voices drifting from the living room. Mark, usually a sound sleeper, would be gone from his side of the bed. When I'd creep out, pretending to get a glass of water from the kitchen, they'd be sitting by the dying embers of the fireplace, their forms silhouetted against the flickering light, talking in low, intense tones. "Just comforting Chloe, darling," Mark would say. His voice a little too bright, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Chloe would offer a weak, almost apologetic smile, her gaze avoiding mine, dropping immediately to the floor. A flicker of doubt, cold and sharp as a shard of ice, would pierce through my complacent sense of security. But I'd quickly smother it. Paranoia, I told myself. Stress, my own anxieties playing tricks on me. Chloe began to regain her color, a vibrant, almost brazen hue returning to her cheeks. Her laughter returned, a little too easily perhaps, a little too loud, especially when Mark was around. She started wearing clothes that were a bit too revealing for a guest in someone else's home, lounging in silk robes in the kitchen when Mark was making his morning coffee. I saw her admiring her reflection in the hallway mirror, a sly, knowing smirk playing on her lips, a stark contrast to the heartbroken, timid woman who had arrived just weeks before. Mark's compliments to me grew fewer, almost non-existent, replaced by a new, almost possessive attentiveness to Chloe. He'd buy her small, thoughtful gifts, a delicate pearl bracelet she'd admired in a shop window, a rare orchid for her bedside table, explaining, "She needs cheering up, Ev. It's the least we can do." And I, foolishly, blindly, would agree, often encouraging his gestures. I saw the change in him, the almost feverish energy he exuded, but I attributed it to his compassion for Chloe, to his desire to lift her spirits. I wanted to believe the best. One humid Tuesday evening, the air thick with the promise of a summer storm, I walked into the kitchen to find Chloe leaning intimately against the counter, her hand resting on Mark's arm, her head tilted intimately towards his. They were laughing, a shared, private joke that excluded me, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the under-cabinet lighting. The air crackled with an undeniable raw intimacy, a tangible energy that sent a shiver down my spine. My breath caught in my throat, freezing me in the doorway. Mark saw me first, his smile faltering, replaced by a flash of panic. Chloe, her eyes widening with a feigned innocence, quickly pulled her hand away. "Oh, Evelyn, we were just discussing that new restaurant in the quarter. Mark says it's divine." The excuse felt hollow, flimsy, a transparent shield against the undeniable, visceral truth that had just slapped me in the face. My stomach lurched. The final, brutal confirmation came on a humid Wednesday morning. Mark had left for work early. A note on the counter about an urgent meeting. Chloe was still asleep in the guest room, the door slightly ajar. I was making our bed, smoothing out the cool linen sheets when I saw it. A delicate silk scarf embroidered with tiny shimmering silver flowers tangled in the duvet, half hidden beneath Mark's pillow. It wasn't mine. It was Chloe's, the one she had worn the day she arrived, the one I had admired, thinking how it softened her broken features, how it made her look almost ethereal. My hands froze, the silk burning my fingers like a brand, searing into my soul. The room spun, the elegant furniture blurring into an indistinguishable mess. The scent of Mark's familiar cologne, mixed with Chloe's subtle, expensive perfume, suddenly assaulted my senses, a sickening, undeniable confirmation of the betrayal that had been unfolding under my very roof, in my very bed. My breath hitched, a silent scream trapped in my chest. The world, my 30-year world, fractured into a million jagged pieces, each shard reflecting a different memory, now tainted and twisted. The warmth, the trust, the shared history, the quiet intimacy of our marriage, all reduced to a single damning piece of silk. I stumbled out of the room, my legs trembling uncontrollably, a cold, unyielding rage building inside me, eclipsing the initial wave of pain. It was a fury born of humiliation, of shattered trust, of profound disrespect. When Chloe finally emerged, sleepy-eyed and dressed in one of my oversized t-shirts she'd borrowed, I was waiting in the living room, the scarf clutched in my hand like a weapon, my knuckles white. My voice, when it came, was a raw whisper, barely recognizable as my own, laced with venom. "Get out, both of you, now." Chloe's feigned confusion lasted only a second before her eyes darted to the scarf, then to my face, and a flicker of something cold and calculating, triumph, crossed her features, quickly masked by a performative shock. "Evelyn, what are you talking about? Are you ill?" "Don't you dare," I hissed, my voice gaining strength, fueled by a searing, righteous anger that vibrated through every cell of my being. "Don't you dare insult me with your lies. I found this in my bed, in my husband's bed, and don't pretend you don't know exactly what it means." Her face went pale, then hardened, all pretense of vulnerability falling away like a discarded cloak. Just then, Mark walked in, having forgotten his briefcase, his phone ringing insistently. He stopped dead in the doorway, saw the scarf, saw my face, saw Chloe's defiant stare. His face crumpled, a mask of guilt and fear. "Evelyn, please!" "No!" I roared, the sound echoing through the elegant living room. A primal scream of betrayal, of rage, of deepest hurt. "Get out, both of you. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. Don't ever come back." Mark stood there momentarily paralyzed by my unexpected fury, his eyes wide with a mixture of shame and bewildered surprise. Then Chloe, with a smirk I would never forget, a gesture of audacious arrogance, calmly took his arm. "Come on, Mark. She's hysterical. Let's go." And he went. He actually went, without a word, without a backward glance. Without a single plea for understanding, he allowed her to lead him out of the house, out of my life, leaving me standing amidst the wreckage of 30 years, the silence of the empty house deafening, punctuated only by the pounding of my own shattered heart. The days that followed were a blur of tears, of uncontrollable rage, and a profound, bone-deep sense of humiliation. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, consumed by a churning vortex of disbelief and pain. The beautiful home, once my sanctuary, now felt like a cold, empty mausoleum, each opulent room haunted by the ghosts of their stolen intimacy, by the whispers of their deceit. I paced the polished floors, reliving every subtle glance, every late-night whisper, every suppressed intuition, feeling like a fool, a blind, trusting fool. My children, Gabrielle and Elise, lived hours away, but I called them, my voice choked with sobs. Barely able to articulate the devastating truth through my ragged breathing. Gabrielle, my gentle artist son, was utterly shocked. "Dad, no, Mom, he wouldn't. This can't be real." He struggled to reconcile the image of his dependable, charming father with this unthinkable, cruel act of betrayal. He was quiet for days, absorbing the news, grappling with the complexity of his father's actions. Elise, my pragmatic, fiercely protective daughter, reacted with a furious, righteous loyalty. How could he, And Chloe, that snake. Mom, I'm coming home. You don't have to go through this alone. I'll burn that house down if it's what it takes. She arrived within hours, her presence a fierce, unyielding balm to my wounded spirit. She handled the legalities, the daunting divorce papers, the painful disentanglement of our shared financial life, her legal mind a sharp weapon against the chaos. She held me when I cried until my body ached, raged with me when I felt overwhelmed by the sheer injustice of it all, and slowly, painstakingly, helped me pick up the shattered pieces of my dignity, reminding me of my worth, my strength. Gabriel, though still reeling from the revelation, called daily, his voice a comforting anchor, a quiet presence that kept me from drifting too far into despair. My old friend Marie, a wise woman with kind eyes and an unfailing sense of humor, also became my rock. A retired literature teacher, she spoke in calming, measured tones, her words laced with the wisdom of years. She didn't offer empty platitudes or cliches. She offered practical help and unwavering, non-judgmental support. Evelyn, this isn't about you not being enough, she would say, her hand gently squeezing mine. This is about them lacking integrity, about their own internal emptiness. And you, darling, are more than enough. You are magnificent. You are whole. Their actions reflect on them, not on you. She helped me see beyond the immediate pain, to understand the deeper currents of human weakness and deceit. Slowly, agonizingly, I began to heal. The initial searing pain receded, replaced by a dull ache that, with time, became manageable. I rediscovered my love for painting, finding solace in the vibrant colors and fluid strokes, pouring my grief and anger and burgeoning hope onto the canvas. I started volunteering at a local art gallery, surrounding myself with beauty and purpose, connecting with other artists who understood the language of emotion. The house, once a symbol of my pain, began to feel like my own again, purged of the oppressive shadows of deceit, filled with the light of my own quiet resilience. I also discovered, to my dismay, the extent of Mark's financial recklessness. He hadn't just left me, he had entangled me in a web of mounting debts and dwindling assets. His successful ventures had been hemorrhaging money for years, a fact he'd meticulously hidden behind a facade of opulence. I was forced to sell beloved pieces of art, a vintage car Mark cherished, and even some of my mother's antique jewelry, just to keep afloat and avoid total ruin. It was another layer of betrayal, a cruel reminder of his deceit. Meanwhile, life for Mark and Chloe, however, seemed to unravel with a speed that was almost karmic. I didn't seek out news of them, but in a city like New Orleans, whispers travel quickly, carried on the humid air like pollen. I heard snippets from mutual acquaintances who, after the initial shock, began to shun them. Their honeymoon phase was short-lived, a brittle illusion that shattered under the weight of reality. Mark, it turned out, was not the shrewd businessman everyone assumed. He had squandered much of his remaining inheritance, and his ventures had been steadily losing money even before his affair. Chloe, it seemed, had gambled on a man who was already financially unstable, blinded by the superficial allure of his perceived wealth and status. Their new life, built on a foundation of deception and resentment, was a constant battleground. Chloe, accustomed to a lavish lifestyle, grew increasingly frustrated by Mark's inability to provide it. Their arguments were legendary among their dwindling circle of friends, public displays of bitterness and recrimination. I heard they were constantly battling over money, over Mark's lingering guilt, over Chloe's increasingly abrasive and manipulative tendencies. The gilded cage they had built together was slowly corroding from within, its shiny exterior flaking away to reveal the rot beneath. Mark, I learned, felt trapped, realizing that Chloe was not the supportive, loving partner he had imagined, but a demanding, self-serving opportunist. He had traded a loyal, loving wife for a volatile, unstable existence. Years passed. I had found a quiet peace, a new sense of self-worth that transcended material possessions or social status. My art flourished, finding an audience that resonated with its raw honesty and emotional depth. My relationships with my children deepened, now based on a foundation of brutal honesty and mutual respect. I had built a new circle of friends, genuine and trustworthy, women who valued character over superficial charm. Gabriel, my son, had become a renowned artist in his own right, often exhibiting his work alongside mine. Beautiful testament to our shared passion and his quiet understanding. Elise, my daughter, was now a respected and successful lawyer, her sharp mind and fierce loyalty making her a formidable advocate for justice. Our bond, forged in the crucible of betrayal, was unbreakable. One afternoon, Gabriel called. His voice was hesitant, laced with a familiar sadness. "Mom, I saw Dad today." My heart gave a jolt, a familiar pang of old pain mixed with something else, a new, unfamiliar sensation. Pity. "Oh?" I kept my voice neutral, composed. "He looks not good. He's living in a small rundown place near Lake Pontchartrain, barely more than a shack. Chloe, she left him. Took what little he had left, apparently, after he got sick. He's struggling, Mom. Really struggling. He asked about you. He looked so broken. A strange, complex mix of pity, lingering anger, and a flicker of something akin to vindication swirled within me. Mark, broken and alone? It was a stark contrast to the man who had walked out of my life so easily, so callously. A few weeks later, Elise visited. She had been clearing out some old boxes from her childhood room in the house, a nostalgic dive into simpler times. She came across an old, dusty shoebox, forgotten in the back of a closet, filled with letters and a small, leather-bound diary. "Mom, you need to see these. I think they explain everything." The first few were letters from Mark to me, written when we were young, during his travels abroad for his architectural studies. They were full of passionate declarations of love, naive dreams of our future, fervent promises of forever. Reading them, I saw the Mark I had fallen in love with, the tender, sincere man before ambition and weakness had corrupted him. A pang of profound sadness, not for what was lost, but for the man he could have been, twisted in my gut. Then, at the bottom of the box, buried beneath my own childish keepsakes, were a series of letters from Chloe to Mark, dating back years before her divorce, years before she moved in with us. They were chilling in their cold, calculated precision. In them, she subtly undermined my character, painting me as dull, unadventurous, praising Mark's vision and true potential. She flattered his ego relentlessly, hinted at a grander, more exciting life they could have together if he were only brave enough to seize it, if he could only break free from his comfort zone. She suggested business ventures, introduced him to dubious contacts, slowly, meticulously weaving a web of deceit. It was clear that her brokenness after her divorce had been a calculated performance, a strategic move to infiltrate our lives, to dismantle my marriage from within. She hadn't stumbled into our home. She had deliberately targeted it, and Mark, with his inherent weakness and his susceptibility to flattery and grand illusions, had been an easy mark. This was not a spontaneous affair. It was a long-game strategy of malice and envy. The letters revealed a deeper, more insidious betrayal than I had ever imagined. Chloe had been systematically dismantling our marriage, brick by brick, from the inside out, fueled by a corrosive envy of my life. My home, my family, my anger, which had mostly subsided into a dull ache, reignited. But this time it was aimed squarely at Chloe, at her cold, calculated cruelty. Then an unexpected, almost shocking envelope arrived. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible, unfamiliar, yet undeniably Mark's. It had been sent from a local hospice. Evelyn, I know this is too little, too late. There are no words to express the depth of my regret, my shame, the profound emptiness that has consumed me. Chloe. She preyed on my weaknesses, on my vanity, on my foolish ambition. She spun a web of desires I didn't even know I had. Dreams of a life beyond anything you and I built together. And I was too weak, too foolish, too utterly lost to resist. But that's no excuse. My actions were my own. I broke your heart, destroyed our family, discarded years of true love. For what? An illusion that evaporated the moment it touched reality, leaving me with nothing but ashes. I'm dying, Evelyn. Cancer. Not quickly. I wanted to tell you this while I still could, while I still had the strength to write. I am so profoundly, terribly sorry for the pain I caused you, for the beautiful life I threw away, for the trust I so callously shattered. You deserved so much more. You deserved true love, unwavering loyalty, and I trampled on it, seduced by a false promise. Please, if you can find it in your heart, Evelyn, to grant a dying man peace, forgive me, not for my sake, but for your own peace, for the sake of our children, who deserve to live without this shadow. I loved you, Evelyn, truly. Forgive my monstrous weakness, yours, always, even when I didn't deserve to be. Mark. The letter dropped from my trembling hand, landing softly on the worn wooden floor. Mark was dying. The news was a punch to the gut, stirring a complex mix of emotions: sorrow for his suffering, anger at his past actions, pity for his ultimate loneliness, and a strange, overwhelming sense of closure. The long, agonizing chapter of our life together was finally coming to an end. Elise accompanied me to the small, run-down house by Lake Pontchartrain. It was a bleak, desolate place, a stark contrast to the grandeur he had once demanded. Mark was a shadow of his former self, frail and withered, his once vibrant eyes now dull with pain and regret. He looked at me, a flicker of something akin to fear and desperation in his gaze. Then, with immense effort, he extended a skeletal hand. "Evelyn," he whispered, his voice raspy, barely audible. "Thank you for coming. I just wanted to say it again. I am so sorry for everything, for all of it. I looked at his broken form, the man who had caused me so much pain, who had dismantled my world, and in that moment, I saw not just the betrayer, but the lost man, the one who had succumbed to his deepest weaknesses, his tragic flaws. I saw the shadow of the charming young man I had once loved. My anger, the last vestiges of it, finally dissolved into a profound sadness. "I forgive you, Mark," I said, my voice soft but firm, imbued with a strength that surprised even myself. "I forgive you for my own peace and for the children." He squeezed my hand weakly, a single tear tracing a path down his hollow cheek. "Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you." Gabrielle visited him too, spending hours by his bedside, sketching his frail hands, capturing the raw, agonizing emotion of his final days. He didn't ask for forgiveness, but his presence, his quiet understanding, was a testament to his own profound capacity for love. When Mark finally passed a few weeks later, there was no grand funeral, no lavish service, just a quiet cremation. We were there, Elise, Gabrielle, and I, a family united by a shared, painful past, now looking towards a future free of its shadows. The final, unexpected confrontation with Chloe came by chance months later. I was at a charity event, a fundraiser for a women's shelter, looking elegant and composed in a simple black dress, surrounded by my new friends, women who had endured similar hardships. Chloe was there too, looking brittle and aged beyond her years, her clothes expensive but ill-fitting, her eyes constantly scanning the room for someone, anyone who might still hold influence, a flicker of the old calculating hunger still visible. She saw me, and a flicker of the old malice crossed her features, quickly masked by a forced, brittle smile. "Evelyn," she sneered, her voice laced with bitterness, her eyes narrowed. "Still clinging to the past, I see. Still playing the victim." I met her gaze, no longer afraid, no longer hurt. My resolve unwavering. "No, Chloe," I said, my voice calm, unwavering, resonating with a quiet authority. "I'm living my truth. I'm building a future. You, on the other hand, still seem to be searching for yours, grasping at shadows." Her composure cracked, revealing the raw, desperate woman beneath. "You always had everything, didn't you? The perfect life, a perfect husband, the perfect children. I just wanted a piece of it. I wanted what was yours. I deserved it more." Her words were a raw, unfiltered confession, stripped of all pretense, revealing the depths of her long-held envy. "And look what it cost you," I replied, a profound sense of pity, not anger, washing over me. "It cost you everything that truly matters. True friendship, love, peace, integrity." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone amidst the glittering crowd, a ghost of her former manipulative self, trapped in her own bitter prison. The weight of her confession, of her raw, corrosive envy, finally lifted a burden I hadn't realized I was still carrying. The cycle was broken. Life continued, not as a fairy tale, but as a journey of quiet triumph. I channeled my energy into my art, creating vibrant, powerful pieces that spoke of healing, resilience, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. I became a mentor to young artists, sharing not just my techniques, but my life lessons. The wisdom garnered from pain and rebirth. My home, filled with my paintings, with the laughter of my children and later my grandchildren, was truly my sanctuary again, a place of warmth, honesty, and genuine love. Inspired by my journey and driven by a desire to help others avoid similar pain, I co-founded a charitable foundation with Annabelle, the woman who had shared her own story of betrayal. We called it the Phoenix Rising, a support network for women who had experienced profound emotional and financial betrayal. We offered legal advice, counseling, and a safe space for healing. It was a purpose that gave my life a profound new meaning. The scar of Mark's betrayal remained, a faint but permanent reminder of the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences of weakness. But it no longer defined me. It was a part of my story, a chapter that had taught me invaluable lessons. I had learned that forgiveness was not about excusing their actions, but about releasing myself from the prison of bitterness and resentment. I had chosen to heal, to thrive, to live a life authentic and full of purpose. The thread of betrayal that once entangled me had been cut, allowing me to weave a new tapestry, vibrant and strong, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. The humid air of New Orleans no longer carried whispers of deceit. It now hummed with the quiet melody of redemption, of peace, and of a love that, though tested and reshaped, had finally found its true, unshakable home within myself.